slave labor.
Before we dive into today's news, here's a message from our sponsor. If you watch China in Focus, you know the story doesn't end at China's borders. What happens inside China often ripples across the entire world. Supply chains, markets, even the stability of global economies can't shift based on decisions made. Tensions between China and the United States continue to shape global trade, energy, and financial markets. And China has been buying gold at record rates. If you live in the U.S., then you can also diversify your wealth with something tangible. Physical gold and silver from American Hartford Gold. These are tangible assets not tied to any single government or political system. Gold has held its value through inflation, currency shifts, and periods of global instability. American Hartford Gold has an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of five-star reviews. They can deliver gold and silver directly to your door or help you set up a gold IRA if you're thinking long-term and want to diversify your retirement. And right now, when you call and mention China in Focus, you could get up to $20,000 in free silver with your first qualifying purchase. Call 855-403-1118 or text China to 65532. That's 855-403-1118 or text China to 65532 or click the link in the description down below. In the Philippines, the largest ever shoulder-to-shoulder joint military exercises are underway. It marks a major expansion of U.S. alliances in the Indo-Pacific. This year's drills have more than 17,000 troops from 7 nations, led by the U.S. The exercises, which began last week, will last about 20 days. For the first time, Japan, New Zealand, France, and Canada are deploying forces as active participants alongside the U.S., the Philippines, and Australia. Japan's involvement stands out as especially significant. Tokyo has sent about 1,400 self-defense force personnel, including ground, naval, and air units. It marks the first time since World War II that Japan has deployed combat troops on Philippine soil. This is raising the level of security cooperation across the region to new heights. On Tuesday, U.S. and Philippine forces showed off their air and missile defense systems in Zambales province along the South China Sea. During the exercise, U.S. Marines used the MADIS system to take down multiple drones.
These are modern threats. These are different strategies that we have to consider. And basically, on this part, kaya makikita natin dyan yung mga drone operations and how to counter them.
A day earlier, troops from the U.S., Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand held their first ever joint live-fire drill to counter amphibious landings. Meanwhile, Japan's self-defense forces took part in a sinking exercise for the first time, launching Type 88 land-based anti-ship missiles. The drill took place in waters near the South China Sea and pointed toward the Taiwan Strait. Japan's participation marks a notable development as it expands operational experience beyond its home territory. The involvement of forces from New Zealand, France, and Canada underscores the global importance of freedom of navigation and the rule of law in the South China Sea. These are seen as global concerns, not just regional issues. It also points to a growing multi-layered security framework across the Indo-Pacific aimed at strengthening collective deterrence. China issued a series of strong responses to the latest U.S.-Philippines joint military exercises, especially objecting to Japan's participation. Beijing viewed the move as part of Japan's broader preparations for potential contingencies involving conflict in Taiwan or the South China Sea. Russia echoed China's position, expressing concern over Japan's involvement in the drills. Meanwhile, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported increased Chinese military activity during the exercise period. 2 Chinese naval vessels, along with aircraft, conducted joint exercises southwest of Taiwan's Penghu Island.
These kinds of actions will always be there on the part of China. It only varies in terms of degree and extent, and sometimes on the variation on activities that they do.
The Philippine Defense Secretary said on Tuesday that China's actions were not surprising. He added that Beijing tends to take advantage when it believes rival powers are preoccupied elsewhere. But he said he was not concerned that the Iran war would weaken U.S. strategic focus in Asia.
I'm not concerned at all on reduced deterrence.
The U.S. and the Philippines continue to deepen their defense cooperation. For 2026, Washington has allocated an additional $144 million to support the development of facilities. The funding is aimed at improving operational readiness at key Philippine bases. Chinese military activity near Taiwan intensifying. The island nation's defense ministry says it detected Chinese warships operating near key military bases on Taiwan's western coast. On Tuesday, Taiwan said they detected 9 Chinese warships and 22 aircraft operating around the island over a 24-hour period. The island is expanding surveillance efforts, including drones and advanced radar systems. The Chinese Communist Party claims Taiwan as its own territory and sends ships and aircraft into the area frequently. Taiwan rejects Beijing's sovereignty claims and says its future can only be decided by its people. Meanwhile, the top U.S. diplomat in Taiwan is calling for stronger defense spending. He's urging the island to pass a comprehensive defense budget, part of which covers buying U.S. weapons. China is ramping up military spending again, extending a decades-long trend. According to a report published Monday by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China has increased its military budget in 2025. It rose by more than 7% to $336 billion. That marks its 31st consecutive year of growth as Beijing continues to modernize its military. The report says that push is helping drive a broader rise in global defense spending. In Asia and Oceania, military budgets climbed to $681 billion, up more than 8% from the year before, the largest jump since 2009. Other countries in the region are also responding. Japan and Taiwan both increased spending amid rising tensions, with Beijing deploying warships and aircraft near Taiwan on a regular basis. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues investing in nuclear and military capabilities to counter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. And zooming out, Europe saw the fastest growth, with spending up 14% as Russia's war in Ukraine continues and NATO allies expand their defense budgets. Some U.S. weapon deliveries to Europe are being delayed because of the Iran war. Here is what the presidents of Finland and Estonia said on Tuesday.
It is a public secret that some of the stocks and delivery systems in the U.S. are either going elsewhere or being delayed. But I don't see any need for alarm here in Finland.
We should much faster develop our defense industry. Not relying on different countries in the world.
Estonia's president said his country had been informed of delays to HIMARS deliveries. Both Finland and Estonia are neighbors of Russia. Recent media reports say the Pentagon has approached automakers about shifting some production to support weapons manufacturing. That includes General Motors and Ford Motor. FBI Director Kash Patel hailing the capture of a Chinese hacker as a historic win for U.S. cybersecurity efforts. Chinese national Xu Jiwei appeared in a Houston court on Monday. That's after he was extradited from Italy over the weekend. Xu allegedly stole COVID-19 research from American universities at a critical time during the pandemic. It's also worth noting that Xi allegedly carried out the hacking on behalf of the Chinese regime. That regime has been accused of withholding critical information about the virus and its origins. U.S. authorities also accuse Xi of being a key contractor for a Chinese hacking group that compromised nearly 13,000 U.S. organizations. China's foreign ministry responded, saying it was strongly dissatisfied with the extradition. It also urged Italy not to act as an accomplice of the U.S. Italy arrested Xi at the request of the U.S. last year. Authorities say it began in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Under the direction of China's intelligence agency, Xi allegedly hacked American universities, immunologists, and virologists. They were conducting research into COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. Xi was also allegedly involved in hacking hundreds of U.S.-based computers running Microsoft Exchange servers. Among the victims are a university and a law firm in Texas. He faces up to 20 years in prison. Xi's extradition comes amid tensions between President Trump and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The relationship between the two was strained after Italy refused U.S. military aircraft access to a base for operations linked to Iran. Trump told an Italian newspaper, quote, "I thought she had courage. I was wrong." Last week, Meloni said that Italy's ties with Washington were always solid. The Chinese hacker's extradition also comes days after Italy's foreign minister visited China. It's part of Rome's efforts to bolster ties with Beijing. Mysterious deaths among Chinese top scientists. The cases involve some of the world's most sensitive defense fields. In China, that includes a leading AI researcher focused on military simulations who died in a car crash in Beijing at just 38 years old. The scientist Feng Yanghe, a professor at a Chinese defense university, had been working on scenarios involving a potential Taiwan conflict. He was described as the leading figure in Chinese military AI. He died in 2023 in what authorities described as an accident. And he's not the only case. At least 9 deaths in China in recent years involved researchers in fields like military AI, hypersonic weapons, and space defense. Beijing officials say there is no evidence of a campaign targeting researchers, and many of the cases have been ruled accidents or remain unexplained. Despite that, these have drawn growing attention. This comes as the U.S. and China compete in technologies seen as critical to future military power, from AI to next-generation weapon systems. Is Chinese leader Xi Jinping concerned about his grip on power? New figures from Chinese authorities show 56 high-ranking officials were penalized on corruption charges in the first quarter of this year. That's 4 times the number over the same period last year. China watchers told NTD that it shows the CCP infighting remains intense. Zhu Yufu is a co-founder of Democracy Party of China. He says the regime's anti-corruption drive is not really targeting corruption, but a way for Xi to flush out officials not loyal to him.
The fact that Xi is arresting more officials over corruption means he lacks confidence and is in a state of panic. He's using the pretext of corruption to root out officials not loyal to him.
Corruption within the Chinese Communist Party is widespread, with no independent watchdog or opposing party to rein in its power.
We all know party officials wouldn't be able to stay in their positions if they weren't engaged in corruption. You can't get promoted unless you're part of it, because everyone else is.
Political commentator Lan Shu says the CCP's anti-corruption drive is a power struggle between different factions. He argues Xi Jinping can use corruption cases to remove officials from rival factions and weaken their influence. Meanwhile, the anti-corruption drive seems to have no end in sight. After rooting out nearly 5 million officials over the past decade, the regime punished over 980,000 officials over corruption last year. Coming up, the Chinese artificial intelligence startup DeepSeek is back with a new AI model, but this time the reaction is much quieter. After shaking Silicon Valley last year with low-cost claims, its latest release is only keeping pace with U.S. competitors. And are the viral Labubu dolls hiding a dark secret? A new report finds they are made with cotton harvested through forced labor. The president of Victims of Communism joins us to unpack what parents should know.
We need to stop. We need to block any of these times where products such as this, what seems like an innocent child's toy, is directly tied to slave labor.
More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. DeepSeek is back with a new version of its AI model, but this time the reaction is far more muted. The Chinese artificial intelligence startup shook Silicon Valley last year by claiming it could build powerful AI at a fraction of the cost of U.S. competitors. Now, the company's latest release on Friday, called DeepSeek V4, just isn't having the same impact. Early tests say it's performing better, but it's not blowing past competitors. Instead, it's pretty much in line with other top AI systems from companies like OpenAI and Anthropic. That shift reflects how quickly the market has adjusted. Cheap, efficient models are no longer a surprise, and the conditions that drove last year's shock just aren't there now. The company's offering developers steep discounts up until early next month to draw in users. At the same time, there's another shift happening behind the scenes. This is the first DeepSeek model designed to run on homegrown Huawei chips. The shift comes after the U.S. imposed export restrictions on advanced semiconductors. Is a viral trend hiding a dark secret? While Labubu dolls have taken society by storm, a new report finds that the vast majority are made with cotton harvested by forced labor. What should parents know about the risks here, and what's the actual price of doing business in China? Joining us now to unpack all of this is Eric Patterson, President and CEO of Victims of Communism. Eric Patterson, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Tiffany, it's my pleasure.
So right now, if you walk around the street, often you can see Labubus dangling off of people's handbags. But actually, you guys at the Victims of Communism just had a new report that shows that these are actually tied to forced labor, or the cotton made from forced labor in Xinjiang. Talk to us about that and why parents should be concerned.
Well, you're exactly right. These are charming little fun toys. And this is a reminder to us that things that seem so insignificant, such as where our socks come from or where a toy comes from, that it really does matter. In this case, 90% of China's cotton come from the slave labor areas of the Xinjiang province. That's 20% of the global cotton supply. And in this investigation that we did with the Campaign for Uyghurs, we found that 16 of 20 of these dolls tested, so the vast majority of them, had cotton directly sourced from this area where we know it's harvested by coerced labor in those camps. And so what we are trying to get the word out is we need to stop, we need to block any of these times where products such as this, what seems like an innocent child's toy, is directly tied to slave labor.
And the New York Times actually backs up your report with their own testing, the isotopic analysis that proves the ties to Xinjiang there. How can this be enforced, though? Because there is a law, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. How can that be enforced?
Well, first, let me note that there are major companies that have taken a stand on these types of issues. So Adidas took a stand about the use of cotton in its products that are manufactured in China, said, no, we're not going to use cotton sourced from these areas. And the Chinese government came after them, denounced them, called it some sort of economic blackmail, blacklisted them in parts of China. Companies are a major part of the solution of implementing the U.S. legislation that you just mentioned, as well as the international covenants that Europeans and other countries have done. And so consumers, our companies, and the government working together, we can actually make a major dent against the use of slave labor in these ways.
I want to dig into that because on the flip side, right, there is a lot where cutting corners or, focusing on the bottom line where you do want cheap products so then you can lower your prices for your customers. But where is that line where, for instance, in this case, Pop Mart is now basically complicit in repression?
That's right. So Pop Mart has rapidly expanded from something like a dozen to 20 to 70 to 100 stores in the U.S. A first step is the U.S. government targeting those stores and shutting them down for their complicity in using this product. This is not something that they don't know about. And one thing to remember about when we talk about what can we do, and particularly we sometimes think about corporations as big faceless entities, but that's not the case. American corporations, European corporations, Canadian corporations, they are people. There are people on their boards, there's people who are their customers, and there's people who are the decision makers in the C-suite. And at all of those levels, we can decide, no, a race to the cheapest product that's by slave labor. We are not going to close our eyes to that. And together, we actually can make that dent, just like Adidas did, and just like some other companies have as well.
And when it comes to accountability, there's a lot of focus on the upcoming expected President Trump and Xi Jinping summit in China. Of course, it's been delayed as the Iran war continues. How important is the issue of human rights? Do you see President Trump bringing up that issue to Xi Jinping? For instance, he's mentioned bringing up the case of Jimmy Lai.
I do think it's very important, and I'm hopeful that the president will do so. And the reason is because the human rights issues are not disentangled from economic competitiveness or national security. These are blended together. The national security strategy that President Trump published at the end of November mentioned China on two of its major 5 points. One is that the U.S. should be taking the economic lead in things like AI, biotechnology, and things at the global level. And that's a shot across the bow to say that we want to have economic dominance. We want to be the world leader and not give that to China. And then second, there's a conversation in there about specifically about the Indo-Pacific, about trade and alliances, again, in that part of the world. And so the case of Jimmy Lai or the case of Uyghur in Xinjiang province, these are not disconnected from economic competitiveness and our national security. In fact, it's a package about the kind of world that we want to live in. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate for President Trump to push very strongly on these issues.
Why do you think past presidents haven't highlighted human rights as much? For instance, there was a brief spell after the Tiananmen Square massacre, but then the access to the China market seemed like just such a big lure that human rights went to the wayside, and the talks were just on, oh, where can we collaborate and cooperate and get that market access? Why do you think this has been pushed to the side?
Well, one of the reasons clearly is that we believed a fallacy. And the fallacy by many in the foreign policy establishment was that as China would liberalize parts of its economy, that it would naturally politically liberalize and take on the traits of a Western democratic part of the liberal order. And that simply has not happened. And it's particularly not happened since 2009 with the accession of President Xi. And so maybe we should have thought that maybe China could become another Asian tiger and follow Japan or Singapore or South Korea. That did not happen. And particularly, we have more than 15 years of very hardline charging in the opposite direction. And frankly, we did not change course soon enough on these issues.
And to watch the second part of the interview, tune into China in Focus tomorrow. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.